Welcome to another edition of the Florida Chamber's Bottom Line with President and CEO Mark Wilson and our very special guest, Governor Rick Scott. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. The Florida Chamber's political operation is consistently polling Florida voters, and what they're finding out is that your approval numbers are continuing to increase. What do you attribute that to?
Gosh, I have no idea. I assume it's just that I've been around long enough. People see that I'm focused on three things: education for your kids. We're putting $1 billion into education this session. Jobs for you. And we had 141,500 private sector jobs last year. Unemployment dropped dramatically. I think we're the second fastest drop in the country. And that I'm not making sure we don't do things in state government that raises the cost of living.
Well, the Florida legislature is in its final days of the 2012 legislative session. And despite the $2 billion budget gap, redistricting, an election year, it appears that lawmakers are poised to pass a budget that reduces taxes, creating more jobs, eliminating outdated regulations, and building on education reforms. Can you kind of weigh in a little bit on that?
Oh, I think we're heading in the right direction. $1 billion more into education, K through 12. Most important thing we can be doing. Reduce taxes for small businesses, very important. Reduce regulation for small businesses. So we're doing the things that make Florida businesses more competitive. Now, we still have to get PIP, auto insurance fraud, dealt with. We've got $1 billion worth of fraud. We have a very good House bill. The Senate bill seems like it's been written by special interest. So Senate bill is not going to reduce the fraud at all. The House bill does, so we've got to focus on that.
Mark, what do you think? I mean, this is almost sort of a dream agenda for the Florida Chamber.
Well, I think since the governor was elected, we've been working closely on a competitiveness agenda. The rest of the country is watching, and Florida needs to do everything it can to stabilize and add predictability to our legal climate, to our education system, to our tax structure. And this really started last year. And I think this year, it looks like the legislature is not going to increase taxes. They're reducing regulations. They're improving education.
I think I have to sign on those, right?
So I say exactly.
I don't think they'll be doing that.
There you go. Exactly.
And Governor, you mentioned PIP. How important is it to get PIP reform and fraud out of PIP under control? I mean, once again, the issue is really being debated right now, and there are some concerns about the legislation.
Oh, absolutely. Well, as Mark said, we had a great session last year. Reduced taxes, reduced regulation. We're making Florida the best place to do business. I mean, that's our focus. I know that's the Chamber's focus. But with regard to PIP, I mean, it's $1 billion worth of fraud. Providers are taking advantage of the system. Lawyers are taking advantage of the system. It's impacting every family in Florida. The poorest families get impacted the most because auto insurance, which this portion you have to have, is continuing to go up, and it's a bigger portion of their income. So it's impacting all of us, but for the poorest Floridians, it impacts them the most.
Mark, anything to add about that? I know you've been very, very involved with the PIP reform issue.
Yeah, I think, look, this is a very difficult issue politically in the legislature, but it's such a no-brainer for the voters and taxpayers of Florida. They're the ones footing the bill, and they're getting frustrated, particularly with the Senate, that the trial lawyers and the special interest agenda seems to be raising the premiums.
You think there's special interest up here?
And we'll deal with that in the fall, Governor. But for right now, what the voters of Florida are looking at is they're paying higher premiums for auto insurance, this $1 billion problem. The legislature can fix it, and they have the power to do that, and we hope they will in the final hours of session.
Well, everybody needs to call their lawmakers. Everybody. We've got a couple days left in session. Call and let them know. You expect them, when they come up here, you expect them to fix problems. This is a $1 billion problem. It's like having $1 billion tax increase if we don't fix it. And that portion of your auto insurance rates is going up at 30% a year if we don't fix this.
That's right.
And Governor, let's talk a little bit about pension reform. This week, a ruling by a judge that basically struck down the pension reform legislation. What are your thoughts about that and the ruling itself?
Oh, gosh, it's horrible for people that are relying on the pension plan. So if you're in the pension plan, what they just said is, on top of our pension plan being over your pension plan, it's your money, being over $20 billion underfunded, now we're going to even further underfund it by paying you out the money that you've paid in the last year. So it's horrible for the individuals that rely on this pension plan for their retirement. I hope the judge changes her mind. It doesn't make any sense because, look, you believe you're going to get a pension, and as they take this money out, there's less of a chance you'll have a pension when you retire.
Mark, what is it? Yeah, what is it that the average person is not understanding it's a complicated issue.
Sure. I think, again, we talk about a multi-year agenda. Last year, Florida found itself as the only state in the nation where state employees did not contribute a penny to their retirement plan. It was the taxpayers that were funding this. And the irony of this court case to me is it was the unions that went to court over this. And what the unions have just done is they basically hurt their own members, because now they're going to further underfund the pensions of their own members. That's the irony in this.
As Mark's, we're dropping, the percentage that we're funding is dropping every year. We're over $20 billion underfunded. That, and put it in perspective, that would be 100% of our general revenues in a year in the state. So it's already underfunded. This exacerbates the problem. So those individuals that are relying on this for their retirement, there's less of a chance they can do that.
So will anything, do you think, happen in the next few months?
Well, I hope so. I hope the judge will change her mind. It's a horrible decision for state workers and those that rely on the pension plan.
And I have to also say, I think the union members that are reading the emails from the unions right now, when they understand this court decision and they finally decipher it, they're going to realize that they were sold a bill of goods that just wasn't true. Yeah. And I think they're going to be upset with their own unions for telling them one thing that just wasn't true. So we'll see how this all plays out in the courts.
More of a political issue than it is anything else.
Yeah, sure.
Well, Mark, unless lawmakers pass an unemployment compensation bill before session ends, Floridians and businesses may face an $817 million tax increase. What needs to happen?
Well, first of all, Governor, thank you for your leadership on this. You met with our board of directors the day before session and talked about that this was a $817 million tax we need to try to avoid. This is a federal issue. It's the federal unemployment tax issue. And because unemployment is high in the nation, many states find themselves in this situation. And so essentially we have an $817 million tax that's pending unless the legislature does something about it. They could wipe it down to zero, and we hope that they will. I think the very latest is that we're going to see some relief, somewhere between half and all. Really want to thank the governor, want to thank Representative Will Weatherford and Senator Don Gates for really coming together in the last few weeks and figuring out a way to get this done.
Governor, anything that you'd like to add to that? I know you're very focused on jobs, creating jobs and opportunities.
Well, every time we raise the cost of doing business in our state, it means fewer jobs. Every time we help our businesses do better because we lower their taxes, lower their regulation, that means more jobs. So this is an example that we have an opportunity to reduce the cost for business, and we ought to be doing it.
And I would just add to that, too. The rest of the nation is watching. Mm-hmm. We did a job summit together last year in Washington at the U.S. Chamber, and all the other states are looking at what's Florida doing. How did they reduce 270 regulations? Are they increasing taxes or decreasing taxes? So when we decrease or eliminate this tax and we reduce regulations, the rest of the country says, well, what's Florida doing? And maybe our next expansion should be in Florida. So that's really what's at stake here.
With just a few days until the end of session, Governor, what's your bottom line?
I'm glad we got education done, $1 billion in education. I'm glad we're reducing taxes for small businesses. I'm glad we're reducing regulation. We've got to get a meaningful PIP reform bill passed. So call your lawmakers. Tell them you're tired of this fraud. Tell them you've got to crack down on unscrupulous providers, unscrupulous lawyers. Get the right bill out of both the House and the Senate and get it passed by Friday night.
Thank you for your leadership on that, Governor. And Mark, bottom line for you?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. In fact, I keep talking about this multi-year agenda. Last year, the Florida Chamber passed 31 chamber-backed bills that were good for our economy, good for jobs. And Governor, you signed all 31 of them. So we want to keep our 100% record with the governor alive. And we want to get another dozen or so bills to your desk this year so we can keep that alive. And I'm looking forward to a good final 24 hours. The legislature has the ability to continue to pass some good legislation that reduces the cost of doing business and cost of living in Florida. And it's up to them, and we hope they do the right thing.
So we look forward to all these pro-business, job-creating bill signings, Governor. Thank you both for being here with us today. And to you, our viewers, thank you for joining us, and we hope your bottom line is looking up.